Welcome back for more adventures with the Riviera in the garage. The lower control arm is drying over there. So let's go get the bushings sized up and all that good stuff because we know what those bushing shells measure. I've got the pins. I just got them cleaned up. Let's go look at stuff and figure this out because this is the easy part. So here's the math and how it works out. We know the bushing shell is around 2.830 plus or minus a little bit. We know the pin is about 3,285. So you take the two and subtract them. And we know that we've got 465 thousandths difference, and 140 thousandths is on the, the flange side, because that's how thick the flange is on these guys. So that means we need 325 thousandths on the non-flange sized. And I've got my number written around here somewhere as far as what it is cut in half. I'll have to revisit that in just a second, but we're going to start cutting up the bushings just like we always do. So let's keep on keeping on. Now the answer for the overall bushing length is 1 inch 640, and that's measured from the outside of the flange to inboard a ways. Now this is how I've been cutting these. I put a band clamp around the bushing and I just gently run my sawzall down because it's a polyurethane. It doesn't take that much to cut. I just kind of clamp the band clamp in a vise. Yeah, it beats up the band clamp a little bit when you do a bunch of them, but it's cheap to be able to do what you need done. So I'm gonna put this in the vise and start cutting. We're back under the car. I've got the control arm here with the cross pins installed. I got the coil spring back up. It's just, a nut there. That's actually held captive on the top side, so that's pretty easy once you juggle it all. You got the little plate deal here that helps hold the spring to the control arm. Keep in mind, I did drill that out big on the bottom side, so that way I could put a socket up through there. So I'm going to wrestle this guy into place now. So the lower control arm is in. I didn't time lapse it because it's kind of a boring procedure. Basically, I got the spring pocket loosely into place. I also don't have a finger for the parking brake cable. We're working on that one thing at a time. But cranked the front up, kind of got it sort of in place, cranked the tail up, found it was 1.5 miles off, used the come along to pull the rear end forward that way. So that way everything would bolt into place. Got that, put the bolts on, tightened them up good and hard because they're 1/2 inch 13 suspension bolts are kind of beefy. Now looking at it, yes, the spring does have a little bit of arch to it, if that was a concern with the flat control arm, but you can kind of look across to the other side and note that there is a very similar arch to it. So given that, I'm not wildly worried about the flat control arm compared to the original one, which you can see way over there, and it's ever so slight V. So now we're going to throw the wheel on this side just because we can, and we're going to start working on the other side. Now that everything's pointing the other way, and no, I did not mirror it, we're back to the driver's side. We got to undo everything we did on this arm and do it again with the new control arm. So that way they match. And the sway bar doesn't have unnecessary preload, so let's just bust this thing free. You'd never believe it, but it actually came out pretty easy because it was just out. So anyways, I've got it sitting here, and here you can clearly see the slight V shape that it has. Anyway, we're going to push the center sleeves out of both of these, pull the shells out, and make sure we put them back where they go in the new control arm. So let's start pushing. The easy part's done. The polyurethane bushing shells came out like they're supposed to. Now I got to figure out how to get those out. Yes, I cut the last one, but the last control arm was pretty well bent to no end. I'd kind of like to keep this one just in case it's needed at any point down the road. So I think I'm just going to try and push these out somehow. Let you know how that goes. So the bushings are cleaned up, but as you can see, I had an issue right there getting the bushing shell out, but a little bit of hammer work, I'm going to weld up that crack that popped up, and truthfully it was more of a split when I was pushing it out. Things didn't go as square as I would have liked, So a little bit of hammer work on a round mandrel, which is fence posts that I found in my scrap pile. Kind of worked them all flat. Going to weld this flat, then I'm going to grind it down, and it's good to go again, and we'll be just fine. I'm not going to buy a new $100 bushing just to get a shell. I'm going to fix what I got. So let's get this together. So I got the bushing with the crack cleaned up. No, it's not perfect, but you're never going to see it under the car. So I've got the bushing smacked into the holes. Now keep in mind, the press isn't quite as press-like as I was hoping, but this is a prototype. Remember that. So I'm going to grab the welder. We're going to put a couple of tacks and stitches and stuff along the way. Going to weld up the entire outside of the bushing because I feel like it. And then we'll get the plate on it to box this into place. Let's keep moving. Lower control arm is all welded up. The bushings are welded into place. With that much hood time, that was about 20 minutes of solid welding. Yeah, I realize I can warp stuff, but I'm not particularly worried about that in this instance. But anyway, I'm gonna go grab a drink. I was pouring sweat under that welding helmet. So let's let that thing cool. We're gonna come back and grind it after it cools off a bit and I rehydrate. The holes are drilled, all that good stuff. I've got it cleaned up. Let's throw some paint at it. The paint is dry. I've got the bushings that we previously had in the other control arm and those specific shells. Let's get those cleaned up, get them put back in their bores, and let's get it back on the car. Don't worry, I spared you guys from a slow time lapse, pretty much just looking at my back or the bottom of the car because the camera gets knocked over. But as you can see, the control arm is in place. I'm going to put the wheel on. Well, I actually probably just articulate the suspension once or twice just to prove it's going to work. And we're ready to move on to the next stuff. But we're going to save that next stuff for the next time. This is all we're going to do for today. The control arm's on. I'm going to start digging into some other bits and pieces, getting the hardware laid out so that way I know where I'm going on the next section. But yeah, right now this is done. I'm going to throw the wheel on it and move on to other stuff. Thanks for watching. We'll catch you next time.